Welcome back. As I mentioned, we have Dr. Kenneth Deck here, who is here on behalf of Tilda Research. Well, Dr. Deck, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Oh, thank you.
You're
Doing
welcome.
great.
You're welcome. Now, you're fairly new here with us on behalf of Tilda Research, but you've been in the community for quite some time. So let's just get a brief background about yourself.
Sure. And first of all, thank you for having me. I've been here since 1980. I'm sure many of your audience knows me, sees me, or knows something about me. I've performed over 350,000 operations since I've been here in Laguna Hills. I recently retired from practice to pursue a goal, and that being clinical research. I've always had an interest in clinical research because it allows me to offer patients, or allows doctors to offer patients, something that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get. Something that's kind of the best of the best, so to speak. Something that they otherwise would not be available to them.
Right.
So I'm doing clinical research now for Tilda. I am the medical director and principal investigator for them.
Okay, now, what does a principal investigator mean?
Principal investigator basically is someone who oversees an entire clinical trial.
Okay.
It has usually as a physician. The trial comes to you and they offer you to do a particular trial. An example might be the COVID vaccine trials. I'm sure your audience is very familiar with COVID and the vaccine and the FDA.
Yes.
And basically, a clinical trial is where you look at the vaccine to make sure that it's effective and it's safe. And so by doing so, you have two groups. You have a group that gets the vaccine and a group that just gets the placebo.
Okay.
And so you compare those two groups to make sure that the vaccine in this case is effective and it does what it's supposed to do. And so then you look at the incidence of COVID between the two groups and you see to make sure that the people who got the vaccine had a much less incidence of COVID.
Okay.
And so then the FDA approves that vaccine.
Okay.
Had those patients not gone into that sort of a clinical trial, we unfortunately wouldn't have the vaccine.
Well, exactly. And I remember when they were requesting people for that and how that all worked out. So you basically just described what a clinical trial is, but in a broader sense, or kind of an overview, give us sort of a title, a clinical trial. What exactly is that?
A clinical trial is something where a sponsor once has a new medication, for example.
Okay.
Any new medication, any new device, any new therapy has to go through a rigorous examination by the FDA to make sure that it's effective and it's safe.
Okay.
And so they begin a clinical trial process. There are basically several types of clinical trials. A phase 1 trial is where they basically just take healthy volunteers and they give them the drug to make sure it's safe.
Wow.
They then have what's called a phase 2 and a phase 3 trial where they take people who have the actual disease and they give them the drug. But there's also a placebo group who don't get the drug. And then they look to assess its, first of all, its safety and make sure the side effects are acceptable, but also that it does what it's supposed to do. And it does it better than anything else that's out there. And so those trials go on for several years sometimes to make sure that the drug is effective and safe, and then it goes to the FDA, and then they either approve it or don't approve it.
Okay. Now, what kind of person or type of person would want to do, like the first one that you mentioned, you're a perfectly healthy individual, so why would you show up to even try it? For fear that something might go wrong?
Money, probably. I mean, the healthy volunteers are people that come in. They usually are observed for a 5 or 7 day period in a separate setting.
Okay.
And their blood is drawn, they're examined, they have EKGs, they have everything else. And obviously the drug has been shown to be pretty safe to begin with, but they basically, it's a job for them.
Yes. Okay. Good to know. Now, you guys are working on a variety of different clinical trials right now. Tell me about those.
We do a lot of trials. We've done a lot of trials. We do areas of cardiology, surgery, oncology, neurology, urology, all sorts of things.
Okay.
Tilda has a very good or high reputation for being able to enroll a large amount of people, but also to give them good quality data. We have good working relationship with like Merck and Lilly, and have done trials in all those particular areas. The big focus now is Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
As people are getting older, more and more people unfortunately are developing this disease because we're all living longer. And Alzheimer's disease, as you probably know, is horrible for the patient, but it's even more horrible for the family, and the cost of medical resources and everything is become astronomical.
Right.
And unfortunately today, there are no effective drugs. All the drugs out there, we've studied most of them, and they're not effective. There are some new trials and studies now that we're working with that have very significant promise. I mean, I'm very excited about those because they can actually reverse the disease in certain patients.
Wow.
And so the patients, for example, get their memory back. In Alzheimer's disease, it's a kind of a unique disease in that the patients deposit a compound called amyloid in their brain.
Okay.
And you can see that amyloid on a PET scan. And as the disease progresses and goes through its various stages, more and more amyloid is there. And so what happens then is that none of the drugs initially that they've looked at have been trying to stop the further deposition of the amyloid and have failed. These drugs that they're looking at now are being shown to be actually reverse the amyloid, get rid of some of the amyloid, and then when you neurologically test the patients, their memory actually is better. And so it's exciting.
You are actually recruiting people now for the Alzheimer's clinical trial here at Tilda Research. Tell me what's involved.
Basically, they contact us, or a lot of times we get a lot of referrals from physicians, neurologists, general practitioners, who have patients who have Alzheimer's disease, and they refer the patients to us. But a lot of times patients refer themselves. Especially patients who have been in some of the other trials that didn't work.
Okay.
And so they contact us, we look at them, we meet them, I meet them, go over, we do some minor testing to see if they truly have Alzheimer's disease, and then basically offer them the clinical trial, explain it to them, explain the risks, everything else about it, what's involved, and offer it to them to see if that's something they want to do. If they do, then they go ahead and get the various scans, the MRI, the PET scans, their blood drawn to see if in fact they have amyloid and qualify for the trial.
Okay. Now, if they've already determined that they do have that, I mean, is that something that would already have been done by their current doctors?
Sometimes, and a lot of times the patient or more of their family kind of realize that, gee, he's forgetting things, you know, he's not remembering, he gets outside the house and he's not sure where to go anymore, or it's pretty obvious, although in the early stages, people, it's very difficult to tell.
Right. Oh yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we think that because we lose our keys, we're actually headed in that direction, but of course it's much more than that, I understand. Now, if somebody did want to contact you, let me go ahead and show that information again. There's a couple different ways. They can go through to your website,
Absolutely.
which is tilda.bio.
That's correct.
Or they could call you at 949-569-6444 to get more information or to sign up to be a volunteer. And is there a cutoff time frame as to when you would not be taking anybody else?
All the trials basically have a time limit for how many patients they want to enroll.
Okay.
And once they hit that point, then they don't enroll any more patients.
Okay.
We have a number of really, really good patient recruiters who, if the people call, they'll talk to them, they'll answer any of their questions to see if it might even qualify or not. So they're very helpful to people.
That's great. Anything I've missed?
No, I think a couple things. Alzheimer's disease, I have my own my mother-in-law. I had a great mother-in-law. Probably the best anybody could ever have.
That's pretty good. Not everybody can say that.
And she unfortunately had Alzheimer's disease. She could remember things from the distant past with perfect clarity. But 5 minutes after eating breakfast, she would not have any idea what she ate. She was totally healthy. She took thyroid and basically vitamins and eye drops. She had no problems with her heart, her lungs, but this disease just progressed and progressed, and it's just so sad. And you know, it was hard, and that got me even more interested in this disease because of her. And because there is no good therapy out there, and because we have to do something. Alzheimer's deaths have increased 145% in the last 20 years.
Wow.
So it's something that we have to focus on, and we don't have anything good.
Yeah.
And probably the only other thing I would say is for all the patients that I've seen in the last 40 years who trusted me taking care of them or operating on them, I would say thank you so much for trusting me and maybe someday I'll see you in a clinical trial.
It sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much for the information. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. And remember, if you want more information or you would like to participate in this particular study, you can call 949-569-6444 or go to tilda.bio. We'll be right back.